In this video, another foamer express, the sun explodes, and some wildlife. Me and a whole horde of foamers were out on this fateful day with 3 targets in mind. C42, which is a pit line local that usually uses GP38s as power, 60T, which had both CSX and Canadian Pacific power in tow, and finally, the main reason any of us were there, 11K, which on this day had 4822, the We Hate Our Employees unit, and also 1700, the Erie Lackawanna ST45 unit. Everyone was out for this insane consist. There was a massive group of people here at Fostoria. But we'd have to wait for that. In the meantime, we were entertained by a bunch of intermodals. On the last intermodal before one of our targets came, the engineer hung out the cab window for us with a big wave that I barely kept in frame. Now, as I just hinted, we then got one of our targets for the day. C42 escaped Tyrone just before 11K showed up. I have seen these GP38 trios moving before, but it was only within Rose Yard and never out on the main line. Anyway, here's the clip. And to continue this foam parade, 11K was the next target to roll by. And of course, the first couple cars were trash cars, so we all had to smell those close up. Anyway, roll clip. I then planned on immediately chasing 11K to North 8th Street where it was going to stop for a crew change, but I was in a bit of a dilemma. At this time, we thought that 11K was going to perform a quick pit stop in Altoona and then continue on
to the elderly foamers on the curve cam.
But we also knew that 60T was going to be there any minute with the CSX and CP power, so I had a bit of a decision to make. Leave now and catch 11K again and miss 60T, or wait and see 60T and maybe miss 11K. Some other things to consider were that at Fostoria at the time, the good lighting was from this side, but my car was on this side of the tracks, and if I stayed to see 60T, I'd need to leave immediately for 11K, which means that I couldn't wait for 60T to clear the crossing to get to my car, because that would be a waste of time. So what I did was I got in my car and moved it over to the other side of the road, but as I was parking, I suddenly heard. So I rush out of my car and see 60T coming around the corner. And after watching this video a few times, I don't like the fact that I panned on the CSX Jevo instead of the CP engine because of, you know, that. Anyway, I get back into my car, but as I shifted my car back into reverse, I hear. I only had time to step out of my car and film from right next to it as another intermodal started racing 60T with a cool wave from the engineer. And as I was inputting the directions to Google Maps, the mid-DPU of the intermodal showed up and I just decided to film out my back window, which is the view you'll be seeing when I kidnap you. Oh, so you're saying that I can't tell people I'm going to kidnap them. Right, gotcha, officer. Anyway, I was trying to decide where to go because I got a tip from the curve cam that 11K was going to be stopped in Altoona for a little longer. Since I had some time, I came up with a genius idea. Westbounds look great from the west side of the curve, and since 11K was a westbound, I decided to climb my way up to the west side. And doing so was the best decision I could have made because the shot that I got is without a doubt my new best shot I've ever recorded. Roll the clip. Once 11K started coming around to my side, an intermodal started racing it, leading to a race between 11K with some insane power and an intermodal, all seen from the west side as both trains climbed the famous horseshoe curve. This is easily my new favorite shot. As I was climbing down the west slope, I heard the rumble of another train, so I begrudgingly climbed back up to see what it was. It was 29G, being led by an ace rounding the curve westbound. Then, as I was climbing down the west slope, I heard rumblings again, but this time I was too far down the cliff to climb back up without being spotted on the track, so I had to settle with recording the tippy tops of whatever this train was. A couple of days later, I was out to Tipton with 2 new targets on my mind. 1800, the yellow DC to AC unit, was going to be leading 11N westbound, and 1067, the recently repainted Reading unit, would be leading 276 eastbound. Normally 276 doesn't go down the Pittsburgh line, but at this time Norfolk Southern was being Norfolk Southern. In reality, there was a rock slide that took out a coal train in West Virginia. Since that line was temporarily out of service, the trains on that line were getting rerouted to the pit line, including 267. 65K, the daily ticking time bomb, went by the Tyrone cam and jump scared me because there's a CSX Jevo trailing. I always love to see some crisp, juicy foreign power that just melts in your mouth. Anyway, a bit later, I turned to my left and saw 2 pairs of headlights. I was hoping that they'd stay side by side as they passed me, but the intermodal was just too fast and it overtook the manifest before it got to me. I wasn't quite mad because this manifest that was led by 2 Jevos had a treat somewhere in the middle. 1070, the Wabash Heritage unit, was the mid-DPU of 36A today. And while 36A kept passing right in front of me, I saw on the Tyrone cam that 3 GP38s and a slug set trailing were flying down towards me from Tyrone. They passed Tyrone at about 50 or 60, and since 36A was going so slow, I was worried that it would block. Thankfully, there are 4 miles between Tyrone and Tipton, and the GP38s took a second to get to me. When they did, they absolutely stormed past me at what looked like upwards of 50 miles an hour. The last and only rear-facing unit in the consist was an RP E4C slug unit. I would then be treated to another faraway meet because this manifest met with 22M way down the tracks in the second meet of the day, and once again the first train cleared before the second one decided to show up. While 22M was passing me, I couldn't help but notice that it was going considerably fast. So I decided to do an experiment. We know that velocity equals distance divided by time. So if we see how long it takes a point on the train to go a known distance, we can calculate the speed. To do this, we're going to have to think outside the box. This side of this container is 53 feet as shown by this label. So if we see how long it takes for this 53-foot long length to pass by a stationary point, we'll be able to calculate the velocity. So on this frame, we can see that the edge of the container is exactly even with this house's chimney, and on this frame, this edge of the container is exactly even with the chimney again. So timing how long it takes between these 2 frames gives us
0.434
seconds. So 53 feet divided by
0.434
seconds gives us
122
feet per second. Converting this to miles per hour, we get
83.18 miles per hour,
which I find really cool. Now, a bit later, I saw 2 sets of headlights coming from either direction, and not wanting to get blocked, I had a decision to make. Do I cross the tracks or not? I eventually decided to run across the tracks. Then the gates activated and I was locked in, literally and figuratively. As the first intermodal passed me, I knew I had made the wrong decision because it was on the close track. And then, from behind me, I heard... and I just stood there in regret. The one chance I had today to get a rolling meet, and I messed it up by literally taking the last minute decision I didn't need to make to cross the tracks and be on the wrong side. Another day, another time. If you're wondering what the power was, here's a screen recording of it going past Tyrone. Speaking of the Tyrone camp, I noticed that there were more senior citizens in chat than normal, and I realized that Amtrak 43 was on its way to me. After a quick stop in Tyrone, 43 zoomed past me, and as I panned around to the left, I was blinded by the setting sun. Now, if you remember, I was out today to catch 1067 and 1800. But at this point, the sun had already set, I was freezing my ass off, neither 1067 or 1800 were anywhere near me, and I knew that the lighting was going to be pitch black by the time either train came through. So I just decided to hold out until the lighting was too bad to stay and headed home. Both trains came through way later that night. On my next outing, I would test out a new location, this being Lower Wriggles Gap Road. The only reason I was out on this day was because the weather finally wasn't freezer balls off cold. Once I was free later in the day, I headed out to find a westbound intermodal and an eastbound coal. A half hour after I got there, the sun went down and it started getting cold again. So I just decided to wait for Amtrak 43 and leave. But while waiting for the Amtrak, I noticed something huge fly into a faraway tree. I took out my camera and zoomed in on it, and staring back at me was a massive owl. It sat there for a little bit and did a little bit of hooing, but didn't do much else. Why does that sound inappropriate? Also, I turned around and saw a deer walking along the tracks and into the woods. Dude, I felt like a Disney princess with how many animals were around me. Eventually, the silver snake made its way around the bend and past me. While getting this shot, I was squatting down so I could have my elbows resting on the concrete barrier, but in doing so, I just made myself look like an 80-year-old taking a picture. Anyway, that's where I'll leave off this video. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go miss another heritage unit. Thank you for watching, have a pleasant day.